Hey, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio, back in the studio today, and today I want to talk about and demonstrate some reverb textures in a modern rock mix. I'm going to be using the external VST rig that I set up in the last video that I did, so I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. But in a nutshell, I set up a Surface Pro tablet with a small Audient Evo 4 USB audio interface, and I'm using it as a send effect from the console. So I'm using it the same way I would my Yamaha Rev500 outboard rack processor, which I'm also going to be using in today's video. I'm going to be using the song Match from my 13 Channels album. This song has a lot of delay on guitars, and the original version has mainly stereo room mics on the drums and some different plate reverbs on the vocals. And I want to try and rein in some of the ambience on the song and make it a little less cluttered sounding. So I thought I would experiment with some different ways to do that and show you in today's video. Reverbs are fun and mysterious. So in this mix, I've got a lot of guitars, and some of these guitars have some delay and some reverb already baked into the track. They were tracked that way. I've got drums. I have a stereo pair of drum room mics, but I felt like this was a little bit too big of a room sound. So it's competing with all these guitars, and the vocal in the original mix had some reverb on it too, and all those things. You have to be really careful when you're combining so many different delays and reverbs. Things start bouncing around all crazy and then they don't make sense anymore. So I'm going to try and make all of these reverbs and delays and things in this mix more cohesive. I can't change anything with the guitar tracks, so I've worked on basing this around those, and I've kind of decided that I need a more defined, smaller room sound on the drums instead of these room mics. So I'll show you what these room mics actually sound like first so you can hear those. So the room mics, the stereo room mics that I originally had on these drum tracks, they sound fantastic by themselves, really sound good. But it's the length of that room reverb. It's just at the wrong length, and it competes with some of the other guitar tracks and things in the mix. So let's take a listen to that with the rest of the guitars and the vocals in the mix. The reverb on the drums is not extremely well defined when you combine it with all the guitars and the vocals. The vocals have a short reverb and a little bit of chorus on the background vocals especially, but there is no other reverb on the drums in that example. However, I've decided to try a digital reverb. It's a convolution reverb, and it's a PCM60 room sound. Now here is a closer look at the external VST rig that I've talked about. Make sure to check out the video I made on how I do this. But basically, there's the little audio interface. I have an aux send from the console connected to this audio interface, the Audient Evo 4. That's going through VST host with Convology XT, running Greg Hopkins impulse response for the PCM60. It's the 2.02 impulse response that I'm using. And again, make sure to check out that other video on how I set up this external VST processing from my console. So I'm using the aux sends to send to the reverb. In this case, it's aux 3 here on the console. And of course, I have these set to post fader. And I'm sending more toms to the reverb than anything else, and only sending a little bit of kick drum and just a little bit of overheads, because we're replacing a room mic. Normally, if I was using a digital reverb, I probably would only send toms, maybe a little bit of snare drum to the reverb. But in this case, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're just sending very little kick drum and very little overheads just to give the kit some cohesiveness like we had with the original room mics. Here's the PCM60 convolution reverb that I'm thinking of using instead of these stereo room mics. So that PCM60 impulse response convolution reverb, it's still pretty long, so it still gives the drums a nice amount of size, but it doesn't seem to compete. So if we'll listen to that in the mix with the rest of the instruments instead of the original stereo room mics, PCM60 convolution impulse response reverb on the drums. It sounds a little bit more modern than the original stereo room mics, so I think it's working really well. Now I want to play the vocal reverb. Now this is the Yamaha Rev500, and this is a chorus and reverb preset. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a halo around the vocals without a huge long reverb. So you want some of that feel and that halo around the vocals without this long tail that's going to interfere with all these guitar delays and the drum room sound. So let's hear this vocal reverb and chorus. Now there's less of this on the lead vocal, there's more of it on the background vocal, which is an octave.
Drifting, sailing on our way back, set on another one. It's time, nothing can last this long. What are we waiting for? Forever in the fire, unpredictable and yet so clear. Why are we looking?
On that vocal and that backing vocal, I have a much shorter reverb, and I've got some chorus on that. So that's what I'm using to create some depth with the vocals, is a little bit of chorus and a shorter reverb. So you've got some chorus to create some depth and some width to the vocal, and you've got a little bit of reverb to create a halo around it, but you don't have a huge long plate reverb like in the original mix of the song, so that it's not interfering with these cool guitar delay parts. Let's hear just the guitars by themselves so you can hear what I'm balancing these other things against. As you can see, we've got a lot of guitar soup going on. All the delays are synced nicely and it all works really well together, but we can't have the drum reverb or the vocals getting in the way of that. So we've got to make sure that none of the ambience and different reverbs on things are fighting with each other, because when you get too many reverbs together in the same mix, things are just bouncing all over the place. You've got early reflections here and reverb tails there, and it becomes a big mess and it doesn't sound very good. But of course, this kind of a track, we want this to sound spacey. We want those delays. We want that reverb and that ambience. We want the width and the depth. So just got to be careful about balancing that. I'm going to do a back and forth comparison on the original stereo room mics and the PCM60 from the Greg Hopkins IR set, so you can hear back to back what those sound like. I'm going to start with the original room mic sound and switch back and forth between that and the PCM60 impulse response. I'm exaggerating the levels of the room mics and the reverb a little bit just so you can hear it a little bit better. But you can hear how the PCM60 impulse response reverb is defining the boundary of the drum reverb sound a little bit better than the room mics. The room mics sound really, really good, but I'm liking this PCM60 in place of these room mics. Now, in most cases, I would never substitute a digital reverb or an impulse response from a vintage digital reverb for a good stereo room mic setup, but you never know. In some cases, you might want to change something later. You can try all different types of reverb. There are no rules to this kind of stuff. I just think it's interesting to try some different reverb textures in this mix to see what we get. This has turned out pretty cool, so I think I'm going to go ahead and print the entire mix for you so you can hear this whole song, and that way I can ride the reverb, show you a little bit of what I'm doing with that. I'm not going to have that PCM60 IR reverb up as much during the main parts of the song, but particularly on some of the tom fills I want to push that and probably move the vocal chorus and reverb up and down a little bit as well during this mix. So let's check out this song.
It's time
Getting the right reverb or combination of reverbs in a mix is extremely important, although in some styles of music you may not want hardly any reverb at all, maybe a small amount of ambience, but basically things sound kind of unnatural with no ambience at all. That's a very unnatural kind of a sound to the human ear. So you need some form of ambience, and of course you're going to use different types of ambience for different styles of music, although there are no real rules, so you can use anything on anything if it sounds good to you. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll take a minute to check out all the links in the video description for all the ways that help support this channel, such as music and things that have been released that I've produced or been a part of. I thank everyone so much for watching, and thanks so much to all the new subscribers. I hope that each and everyone out there has a wonderful, excellent day, night, evening, weekend, weekday, hour, minute, second, nanosecond, whatever it is you're having. Have a good one. Thanks so much for watching.